When your life's been put on hold for far too long, when the sorrow and despair is growing strong, there is always something good to be obtained from breaking loose and leave the things that kept you chained.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the homestead. Well, the weather has completely changed from cold and rainy to warm and steamy. It is very humid today, but we are glad for the change. Today, the greenhouse inside got up to 109. So Kevin and I decided to put up the shade cloth. You can see it there. It's a 60% shade cloth, which will help keep the temperature down in there. But honestly, we've moved all the plants out of the greenhouse, and we're hoping that from now until they get into the ground in everybody's gardens, they can stay outside as long as the weather isn't super severe. But we've had our plants for a while now, but the weather is not cooperating. It hasn't been. Things are still pretty wet. So people at the farmer's market haven't been buying their tomato plants yet because it's just been too wet. Lots of people are saying they haven't even tilled up their gardens, but we're hoping in the next couple weeks things change pretty quickly. And all of our plants can go into the ground very soon. So my point is, these plants here, and I have them all around, I'm going to show you, they're actually getting pretty stressed out. They're stressed from the heat, they're stressed from being in their little pots. They want so desperately to go into the ground. So today we're going to help them out a little bit. We're going to fertilize them. Today is a perfect day to fertilize them, especially right now. The sun is going down, it's in the evening, and we'd like to show you the gizmo that we have discovered that has been making fertilizing for us very smooth and simple, and the gadget is actually pretty inexpensive. So these plants are desperate for their evening watering. They will definitely enjoy some fish emulsion, organic fertilizer. So let's get started on that this evening. So I want to show you some examples of these plants, specifically these tomato plants, having some stress. So you can see on some of these that the very bottom leaves are becoming yellow. They're getting stressed out. Number one, they need some fertilizer. Number two, they need to get into the ground. Number three, you know, they're getting kind of long and lanky. There are a couple reasons for this. Number one, they need to get into the ground, and they've been growing pretty closely next to a neighbor. So they're starting to grow tall rather than bushy in order to get adequate sunlight, okay? But this doesn't mean that the tomato plants are sick. It just means they need a little extra help. Now, I want to show you that inside, that the root system is still in really great shape. I'm just going to take this plant out of this little pot. And while you can see the roots in there, they are still a good color. They're still nice and light colored. They're not dark brown, they're not rotten inside, and they're not so wrapped around the pot that they're suffering. So this isn't really considered root bound, it just needs to get into the ground. And the fact that they're getting tall and kind of long and lanky, that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because with tomato plants, they prefer to be planted either deep in the ground, so, you know, maybe even up to here, so these branches and leaves would be pinched off, or they can be buried kind of in a trench on their side like this, with this part of the tomato plant up, so that all of the roots can grow into the ground from this stem. So the fact that these are long and lanky isn't necessarily a bad thing. So if you are buying your tomato plants late and the growers have long, lanky tomato plants, it's okay. I do want to tell you a little secret about tomato plants that are in the store, in the big box stores. They are kind of short and compact, and I want to tell you that a lot of the big growers, and I'm not going to name any names, but they spray their plants, specifically tomato plants, with a growth retardant so they can keep them in the greenhouses longer. They'll stay short, they'll fill out a little bit so that they can hold them in the greenhouses, get them to the stores, keep them at a manageable size while they're in the stores until you buy them and take them home. The problem with that is the growth retardant doesn't just have a magical date in which it stops retarding the growth of your tomato plant. So the ones from the big box stores may be stunted for almost the entire life of the tomato plant. So that's something to think about when you're deciding whether or not to buy at a farmer's market from a local grower or from a big box store.
So today we're going to fertilize our seedlings, and what we'd use on our homestead is fish fertilizer, sometimes called fish emulsion. This is a 5-1-1 fertilizer, so not a real strong fertilizer, especially not the way we're going to use it on these seedlings, but it is a great organic alternative to using something like Miracle-Gro or some of the chemical fertilizers. This is an all-natural product that is really great for your seedlings. The product that we use to actually put the fertilizer on is this little gadget right here. This is called a syphonject. It's made by a company called Dram. We picked this up at just one of our local farm supply stores, and I think it was $12, $14, something like that. We'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys can see. But what this does is you hook this up to your garden hose. So you have a hose coming in this way and a hose coming out this way. And then this little tube right here will put down into a 1-gallon jug. This actually pulls the fertilizer up and then shoots it out through the hose that's watering the plants. Now when it does this, it dilutes it to a 20-to-1 strength. So you want to have your fertilizer in this gallon jug 20 times stronger than what you want it to be on your plants. So let me give you an example of what we will be doing today. When we use fish fertilizer on our seedlings, we use a ratio of 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. So since we're using a 1-gallon jug here, we're going to actually put 20 tablespoons or a cup and a quarter of the fish fertilizer in this jug and then fill it up the rest of the way with water. That way when it pulls it through, it'll be the correct dilution. So when you buy the syphonject kit, it'll come with this little hose and spray nozzle. I'll be honest, when we first got it, we looked at this thing and we said, we have a much nicer one. We'll use just our normal one that we use when we water our plants. And actually the syphonject really didn't work very well when we were using our own. But when we switched over and started using the one that came with the kit, it actually started to work really well. So don't throw this away. Don't think that you should use a different one. It has something to do with the number of holes in the end of here that it just keeps the pressure and everything just right. So use the one that comes with the kit. Now speaking of pressure, you do have to have a minimum of 35 psi on your hose in order for this to all work correctly. If you're hooked up to municipal water, city water or something like that, that should be no problem at all. If you have rain catchment and you're on just a gravity fed system, that may be an issue. Or if you have an old well like we do, you may be close. I just happen to have a pressure gauge, so what I like to do is I put one of these Y adapters on the end of my garden hose. This is the side that the hose will come out of for watering. Now on this side I actually put my little pressure gauge, and that way I can keep an eye and make sure that we do have 35 psi. And you can see that we barely make it. Hopefully nobody flushes the toilet while we're trying to water the plants, or it may drop below 35 psi. So we're going to just leave that on so I can keep an eye on that while we're watering. That's completely optional. You don't have to do that, but it does help. Alright, so let's get started mixing everything up. The first thing we're going to do is measure out our fish fertilizer. And this stuff smells as good as it looks. Alright, so there's 1 cup. Not really something you want to make a smoothie out of. So 1 1/4 cups. And then we'll just fill this up with water. I'm going to rinse this off so when I'm holding it later I don't have fish all over my hands. Alright, and then we'll just fill this up. Alright, so we got about a gallon of water in there. This isn't exact science. Remember my phrase that I like to use? Homestead perfect. That's what this is. Homestead perfect. Alright, so now this is the hose that's actually hooked up to the water. So we're going to screw the syphonject onto here. And then this tube will go down into the gallon jug. Alright, so then on this end, we're just going to screw the other hose, and this is the hose that actually has the watering wand on it. And they do say not to use more than a 50-foot hose. So I don't think this is. I think this started as a 75-foot hose, but it's broken so many times and I've pieced it back together. It's got to be down to 50 feet by now. So it should work just fine. And then we have our watering wand. We'll just screw that little nozzle on there, and then we're all set to go. Now when we do this, Sarah's the one who actually waters the plants. I stand over here and make sure that everything is working correctly. And this will last plenty long to water the plants that we have here, and maybe even a little extra. So she'll give everything a really good soak. It's good to do this kind of in the evening or morning when it's not really hot out. I wouldn't do it right in the heat of the day, but this is the perfect time right now. So we're going to get started watering. We'll show you exactly how this works.
Okay, we're gonna get started. Before I start just watering all the plants, I need to wait until I see some of the fish emulsion coming out, and you should be able to see a color change between the clean water and the water that has the fertilizer in it. So we're gonna get started.
So now that Sarah has her wand turned on over there, I'll turn this on here, and you'll see that the fish emulsion will start to come through this little tube, and then she just needs to wait until it gets all the way through the hose before she starts watering. And you should also see the level starting to go down in the gallon jug.
Okay, I see the change. Here we go.
So when you find the strength to really shed your skin, all you really need to do is search within. When the road is long and hard and without end, and you feel like nothing's waiting around the bend, all good things will always come to those who wait.
Alright, so we're all done watering the plants. That gallon was just about the perfect amount for what we needed today. So the last thing we have to do is to clean this out. The way that we do that is just rinse out our jug real well, fill it up with some clean-ish water, and then we'll just stick that back in and we'll run water through until we see that that is coming through clear, which will take a little while.
So there you go, guys. I shared one of my secrets to keeping these plants healthy, saving them from some stress that they're going through. They're going to be beautiful. You guys, I hope you learned something today. If you are interested in learning more about that syphonject, we will make sure to put it in our Amazon shop. You can check it out there, learn more. If you know somebody who would benefit from this information or who would enjoy our channel, please share this information with them. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, thanks so much for stopping by the homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.